Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that. This is, like we were just saying, it's kind of been like tossed together over the past few weeks, but the rush up to NAB is always a big kind of confusion as it goes.
You think?
Yeah. This is my second one, and I've definitely felt it this time in terms of all the pieces. They do come together, but
all at the last minute.
Trying to keep them all straight is really hard. So
it's never changed. I've been doing this since the mid '80s. So
really?
I'm an old fart.
Oh, nice.
And it's never changed. It's like it's always at the last minute. Everything comes together.
Well, and it's almost like past the last minute because we were doing stuff yesterday and doing stuff today and just like tightening things up and cleaning things up and making sure everything's singing. And I've changed the network a little bit. I'm kind of the network nerd, so I decided I was going to do it a little differently. So I set it up half last night, set it up the rest this morning, and it's working great. It's just
usually that's the biggest mistake though, is because you get everything working and you go, oh, Saturday night I need to make one. I'm going to make one little thing, make it a little better. And
yeah,
it's just like
you're totally right.
Then you screw it up.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. So thankfully, everything's humming along. But anyways, so look, I want to talk briefly about Telestream. And now the audience that will watch this will probably be somewhat familiar with that name. But how you guys kind of are in the industry and your relationship with BirdDog and NDI in general, and kind of go over some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'd love to. Let's first of all, how long you been with Telestream?
Well,
all that stuff.
Okay, Scott Murray, and I've been with Telestream 6 years. Been in the industry since '84, something like that. So not 40 years, but
getting there.
Getting there, yeah. You can tell by all the gray hair that's on me.
It's almost as old as I am, so go ahead, yeah.
I got children that are your age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm trying really hard to not not say things like that. But anyways.
I know, that's right. That's okay. I can take it.
You've been in the industry for a while. You've seen it for quite a while.
What's amazing is having that perspective.
Yeah.
See, I've lived through analog to digital conversion, the digital to high definition conversion, and now the high definition to the 4K. And then also what the topologies. It used to be networking it was no networking. It was actually point-to-point video connections.
Yeah, right.
Everything was point-to-point video connections. And now what's happened in the last few years is IP networking has come into play. And then with technologies like some of the SMPTE standards, 2110, which is a really big deal, but also NDI that came into existence has also been a really good deal for transport and moving stuff around. And then the third thing that's really gone crazy in the last few years, it used to be that you could only get your content out through a cable network or satellite.
Right.
But now with the OTT streaming, the internet itself. So I always use the example, I went to a little college called Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And I could never get Cal Poly football because it was too expensive to produce and too expensive to distribute. So consequently, I could never watch the football. But now, with things like our Wirecast product and with distribution of OTT content and cameras like BirdDog to be able to democratize that you don't need as many people to do the whole production itself, the costs go down. The distribution is available. And so now you can get high school sports, college sports, you can get anything you want over the internet. And that's been the biggest single change that I've seen in 40 years of in the television industry. Right.
It's just accessibility has become just like through the roof.
Well, and it's not just sports, it's like you can watch theater and choral concerts, and you can teach and education for corporations. You can do training videos. You can do, every single business, church, education, they're all using video now.
The application I always think of, because we have a bunch of places in Europe that are using the P100s, and they're P100s in operating rooms, in sterile operating rooms. And so what they do is they bring in like the best doctors in the world. So now the doctor doesn't need to be in the hospital. He can be in his office, in Boston, but this operation's happening in like London, England, and they can bring him in over NDI, over the network, basically using BirdDog Cloud in this instance, but bringing them over, and then he can be on site watching what they're doing and giving instructions and all that sort of great. Like, it blows my mind. Same thing with the way that they do what do they call it? When they're doing production for like TV shows, it used to be you'd fly the guy out, and he'd you put him up in a hotel, he'd show up, he'd do the show, he'd stay the night, fly out the next day. Well, now with all of this stuff that's traveling over the internet, like you said, they can just do these from their houses, and so he can do 3 or 4 a day if he wants to, and you get the best guy to do it, but at a significantly reduced cost because you don't have like all the hotels and all the food and all the travel. So it's been unbelievable. It's happened so fast, and I feel like in one sense we're like catching up, and then in another sense we're like launching a whole bunch of new stuff. And so
it's been the massive convergence of technology that has enabled all these new workflows to be done. So you can do remote production pretty straightforward with cameras like this and our Wirecast software. We ran a press event 6 months ago, and I was in the studio, and the guy that was actually producing the show was in Pennsylvania on the other side of the country. And we were bringing in remote guests from Germany and from England. All running simultaneously, and the guy was producing the whole thing. So if you think about that model, and what happens is, used to be that you still do, is when you go to do an event, you ship your equipment, ship the person or people to do the event. Now if you have a centralized location of production gear and the talent that actually knows how to switch the shows and produce the shows, you could do multiple shows in one day without actually having, you can set up a studio and just I'm doing the East Coast, I'm doing the SEC football on one in the morning, and I'm doing the Pac-12 stuff in the afternoon, or doing concerts out of University of Alabama, and then you're doing Stanford University stuff on the other later in the day. I mean, it allows for this explosion of being able to produce more content for a less amount of money. It's reducing costs like crazy. It just blows my mind that how quickly that's all happening. And I want to talk about, before we keep going here, I want to talk about, a lot of guys are familiar with Wirecast, but I want to touch on Wirecast 15 because you mentioned this. And what people can look forward to with getting into Wirecast 15, because when you sat down, you said you should see Wirecast 15. And so I want to know what you mean by that. It's no problem, but now you've piqued my interest, and so I want to know. So tell me about it. What's on the horizon with Telestream and with Wirecast 15 in particular? So as a background, Telestream's been around for 24 years. And Wirecast came along with an acquisition about 10 years ago, and so it's been a real crown jewels of the company, along with a lot of the other products that we do. And we have continued to invest in Wirecast over the years. Now, with Wirecast 15, we just launched 10 days ago. There are a whole new host of features that are inside the product. So anybody that's a Wirecast customer now, look to upgrade, because you get all kinds of new stuff. So we're like, what kind of new stuff? All right, we've got a thing called, if you bring in remote guests. Well, what happened during the pandemic was people started doing remote concerts, and they were actually using Wirecast to bring in the concerts or the people that were playing guitar or whatever. But it was mono, it was low fidelity. We increased Wirecast Rendezvous capability to add music mode. Which allows higher fidelity, so people are now bringing in remote guests and concerts, so you get actually a substantially better audio quality. So that's one thing that we've done. The other thing that we did was we really increased the performance. So one of our main competitors, vMix, they have a great job. It's a good product. We now are faster at production than vMix, and we've done benchmarks. And I'm sorry to our vMix friends.
That's okay.
But
they'll advocate for their stuff on their time. It's all good.
But we substantially increased the performance of Wirecast itself. So now we use less CPU and GPU time to actually do encodes and decoding for multiple camera streams. Like with NDI, you have to bring in multiple cameras, you have to decode it, so you're using up the CPU. When you're sending out encodes, you got to use the GPU or the CPU to be able to encode multiple streams.
I could definitely benchmark it for you, because I do that stuff. Like in my studio, this is my studio machine that I use back in Michigan, and I probably have 4 or 5 NDI sources, and then I'm shipping off to Restream, which is then going to multiple places, but then I'm also potentially doing recording and NDI output and all that stuff, and it chews up CPU eventually when you start using all that. I don't even know if I have the GPU in the machine to do any of that stuff. So it's a significant use where I'm running 60 or 70%. So if I'd upgrade to 15,
it'll reduce the load on the machine.
Definitely see the difference. Awesome.
Yeah, it's what it means you can do is more stuff on the machine if you have to bring in churches, for example, use ProPresenter. So it has, depending on the machine and the power, you can actually now have more horsepower to be able to run your other things like ProPresenter on the machine as well. Do
you find folks are using like the same machine for running both Wirecast and ProPresenter?
Yeah. Some do. Some people have distributed workflows. I was just speaking with an event company, and what they do is they actually use a production switcher to actually switch the cameras. And then they take the baseband output, bring it into Wirecast, and put on the lower thirds, and they use the pre-produced content insertion at that point with the encode. So because Wirecast is so flexible, you can then choose to what you can put it all in one, or you can actually pull it apart. So people are doing graphics externally and bringing in graphics, or people are running ProPresenter on the machine or running it external and bringing it in as an external event. So it's flexible enough. It depends on how much budget people have. If all they have is, if it's a one-man band, they'll do it all on one machine. But if they have the budget or the capabilities with multiple people, they'll decentralize some of the production. So what happens with Wirecast, there's 3 modes in a show. There's the engineering setup, which is like I like to call the plumbing, which is when these cameras are coming in and I'm going to have this physical infrastructure. That's the engineering setup. There's the show setup, which is bringing in your pre-produced content. Lower thirds, all your graphic elements. And then the third aspect of it is the most boring part, which is actually running the show, which all you're doing is switching and firing macros and stuff like that. So what happens on Wirecast, in particular Wirecast gear, is you can offload that execution onto a control panel. So then the UI on the computer is open to be able to run ProPresenter.
Oh, nice.
You know what I mean? So then what you've got is the operator that's actually just switching the cameras and running the lower thirds and everything and running the whole thing off the control panel, while that opens up the whole rest of the computer to be able to use for the other applications.
Yeah, that's a really smart workflow. I run a little show, each week. That's just for like support or whatever. We talk about these sorts of workflows and how it makes sense. I like the distributed model just because it's like one machine for one job type of thing, and then you can adjust the things in the program to do the, to run that program correctly or optimally. When you're like piling things on, you chew up CPU and GPU and what have you. However, you're right, budget is always, like for most churches or community groups or theaters or whatever, there's always a budget.
There's always a budget.
And so to do it, to be able to layer it like that, to where then you can run it off of macros and just fire them that way, makes total sense.
A little secret is that's the way. I've got friends that are TDs on Super Bowl, NASCAR, and stuff like that. That's what they do. So when a truck rolls into, say, the Super Bowl or NASCAR, the truck has already got the engineering. It's all been set up. The plumbing's all done. When the TD comes in, he comes in with a thumb drive, sticks it in the big production switcher, and loads up all the graphics and all the EMIMs and macros and stuff that he's using to actually execute the show. And then when he executes the show, puts his feet up on the table, and you're listening to the director call the shots, and he's just switching the cameras and firing some macros. Go to commercial. There's the graphic goes in. So it's actually calming down, because live production is super stressful. So you want to prepare. So the second phase of the preparation aspect is what's really, really super critical. So then what it does is it simplifies the execution on air, and all you got to do is switch the cameras and bring on your graphics and play your pre-produced content.
Oh man, I love that. I love a good workflow, because it's it's like you said, it's super stressful, and if you can remove that element, like if you can be the conduit to remove that element from whoever it is that's running the show, that's a huge relief. You can train volunteers, or you can bring people up to speed quickly. You can get them, teach them new software fast, and it's just like, but it's not a huge deal. We use these macros, or we use these buttons, and we switch that way, and that's all it is. Yeah, it makes total sense. But in terms of just like the way it's thought out, it sounds like you guys have really sorted that out. Yeah,
it's a paradigm that you take from, that's why being a gray-haired grizzled veteran, I mean, I've got so many scars on my back from doing it wrong. I'll never, one of the products that we put out years ago at another company, it crashed during the NFC Championship game.
Oh boy!
And so I got scars from living some of this stuff. So
you have the benefit though of like looking back over time and saying like, yeah, let's avoid that path again.
You learn more from your mistakes than your successes in life. That's for sure.
That's true. Very true.
So Wirecast 15, the other thing that we've done, so there's a whole host of features. So go to our website, you can actually see all the stuff.
Cool, and that just plug that website real quick.
Telestream.net.
Okay, cool.
And there's a Wirecast microsite. Somebody told me the other day, stop using the word microsite. I don't know what else to call it, but that's it's go to the Wirecast page.
They'll understand. Yeah. Okay, great.
We added a subscription model as well.
Yeah.
So what we found was a lot of customers that know Wirecast and wanted to invest, they buy a perpetual license and great, off and running. But we have a lot of customers now that want to dabble. They want to get into streaming and they're not sure. So we added a subscription for a month-to-month plan.
Okay. Yep.
You can commit annually if you want to do a month-to-month at a lower price point or an annual commitment. So we've added these various financial models to allow customers to find a way to get into this without actually making the substantial investment in the Wirecast product itself.
Okay. So people can step into it without necessarily making a huge investment. They can try it out for a month or two.
Yes.
And see if that's something they want to get into.
Now the next thing is on the Wirecast gear front. So we've had Wirecast gear for several years. It was customers came to us and said, hey, I love Wirecast. What in the world can I run it on? What kind of computer?
Right.
What kind of I/O cards do I need? Do I need a GPU or not? It's like, well, yeah, you could use this or that or this or that, And so they're like, build their own gear. And they said, can't you just build one for us? So several years ago, we said, okay, we'll build one. So we built Wirecast gear, version 1, version 2. So this year, right now, today, we actually announced Wirecast gear 3rd generation.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's an all-in-one, one throat to choke from Telestream. It's got Wirecast, it's got Switch, it's got everything all pre-installed and ready to go. You buy it from us and you're ready to go. And
awesome.
There are 4 models because what's interesting, and it goes back to your cameras, you've got a 4K camera.
Yeah.
So what are people doing for production with 4K? They need 4K production systems.
Yeah.
So Wirecast gear now has 2 models that are 4K. One for HDMI inputs, one that supports 12G SDI inputs, and they all support NDI as well.
Yep.
And we have 2 models. If you don't need 4K cameras, maybe you have some older cameras that are 1080p. So we've got an HDMI and a 3G version as well. So if you think of those 4 models, 2 are HD, 2 are 4K, HDMI and SDI is the way that the matrix.
So this is a petty question, but so can the HD versions, do they accept NDI?
Yes.
Can they take a 4K NDI source?
They can.
And they can take it at 4K?
Yes.
Oh, well then there you go. So
but the difference is the baseband I/O.
Yeah, yeah.
So you could get into the Wirecast gear at a lower price point, and if you only have 4K NDI cameras, you can still do a complete 4K. Yeah. You can stream 4K too. So these new boxes, we've put in we upgraded the CPU to an AMD Ryzen chip. We also have GPUs on all 4 models now, because what ends up happening is when you want to encode multiple times, you really want a GPU to do that.
Yeah, something you can do concurrent streams or something like that. Yeah,
yeah, you want to stream to multiple destinations.
The reason I ask is because we get a lot of people that have older cameras, like you said, that already do SDI, 3G SDI, or they do HDMI or whatever. So churches, they've already got some cameras. They want to get a system to switch correctly and to ship it off to YouTube or whatever they're using. So they would invest in something like the smaller model, but then when they go shopping and they want to get the P400, your system, the HD system, will accept the P400 over NDI.
Yes.
So they're ready for that when the budget is ready for that.
Correct.
But in the meantime, they can connect their current infrastructure, and get off and running with
and also
Wirecast.
The opposite happens too. It's interesting. I was at a church a month ago, and I was looking at their gear, and the guy was really excited because he had some new 4K cameras.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't wait to get these things in. I was like, well, what are you producing them with? He said, well, I got this switcher here. It's like, well, that's a 3G switcher. That's an HD switcher. It's not going to do 4K for you.
Right.
But the beauty is, well, I'm not streaming 4K. Well, you actually don't have to stream 4K to take advantage of a 4K camera.
Right, yeah.
What you can do is, because the canvas is so large, you can center cut an HD image right out of it.
Right.
Because 98% of people are streaming HD. They're not,
or less. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe 720p, but if they want high quality, most of them are going to 1080p streaming.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's bandwidth issues and stuff, so most people are not streaming 4K. But being able to bring in 4K cameras gives you the ability to have a much more flexible production.
Right. Well, and it gives you a little option in the future too, when if bandwidth becomes cheaper, or you guys do decide to go bigger with the installation, then like, okay, well, then we have a 4K sensor, we've got the ability to do that. That's the thing with these things, it's a 1-inch sensor, so you get that real crisp image, but you can output the NDI at 1080p 60 if you want, but still have that 1-inch sensor, which gives you a lot more depth in terms of color and dynamics, so you get all the benefits of it, but it's still just a 1080p 60, so that's 140 megs or something like that, through the network into Wirecast, and then you're off and running with that nice image. That's, again, it's 1080p, but when you're ready to do it, you can make the transition. So it's nice to know that you guys are ready for that through all of your models. I mean, I think the NDI stuff is the answer. I'm a little biased, but I like the idea that you're not limiting, and you're not like putting customers in boxes and be like, well, you bought an HD system, so that's all the cameras you can do, and you have to buy a new one in order to do the 4K stuff. So
that's been the problem with this industry for a long time. Is you throw out the baby with the bathwater when you need to make a technology transition. This is what happened with from analog to digital.
Right.
You had cameras, the whole production chain, cameras and switchers and audio routers, video routers, everything was thrown out, new infrastructure was put in. When you went to HD, you had the same problem. All the cameras, all the routing, all the switchers, everything went out, and you had to bring in HD equipment. And then they went to 1080p, 3G, and people were like, really? No. So, okay, and they started to make some of that transition.
Right.
But now what's happened with IP, cameras are putting out native IP 2022 or 2110 NDI, and they're going straight from the cameras into the production gear, and the router itself is just a switch at that point in time to do the routing. Right. And the beauty of IP network infrastructure is it's future-proof.
Yep.
You can route SD, HD, 4K files all over the same routing infrastructure. So the future is this massive transition that we went from the technology. So you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Now, when you put an IP routing infrastructure, you've got a 4K camera.
Yep.
Great. You just bring it in, plug it into the network, and boom, you're up and running.
Yeah, and it just comes in as a regular source that you can use with the rest of your fleet, regardless of how old it is.
Yeah. So
I love that.
We're in a fantastic. You have many years of exciting.
You too.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's really cool. I'm a big Wirecast fan. I had friends, one guy that moved on from Telestream, but he basically like converted me over and showed me Wirecast gear. Back then, it was a few years ago now. But yeah, and then really kind of like showed me the light in terms of where Wirecast makes sense, and for what I do for BirdDog and that sort of thing, it makes total sense. So I love it. It's perfect fit for me.
Well, we're happy to thank you very much for being a customer.
Oh, for sure.
To be honest, a few years ago, I hate to say we kind of lost our way. We were so focused on a lot of other things that we didn't pay attention to the customers and what was going on. We were getting feedback that was performance buggy, and so we doubled down. So our product manager said, look guys, we got to double down on this stuff. And so in the last year and a half, there's been a substantial concerted effort to double down on stability, double down on performance, double down on features that really, really matter to customers. And the Wirecast 14 and now 15 are actually the culmination of this. And so anybody that was moved away from Wirecast, I encourage you take a peek at it now, because it really is increased substantially with the capabilities, like the integrated stock media library that we provide for free if you're on your support plan.
Oh, nice.
And if you ever stream stuff, you need audio.
Yep.
And if you're going to YouTube or Facebook Live, they'll take you off the air if you're not using licensed or royalty-free content.
Yep.
So with Wirecast, you can get the stock media library. There's over 1 million video and audio clips that can integrate directly into your production. So if you say, oh man, I need some B-roll of some motorcycles going down through the desert, great. go into the stock media library, which is integrated into the Wirecast UI.
Yeah.
Search for the shot, it comes up, bring the shot into your Wirecast production, bang, now you're ready to go. Need some intro audio and some outro audio, great. Go in, I want some ambient music or I want some chill out music.
Right.
Bang, bring that in and then integrate it into production and you're good to go. So
and that's included in the support plan you said that they have?
Right.
Awesome.
We have a $99 support plan annual, and what it gives you, the stock media library, and it gives you all software upgrades for free.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you also can talk to the support team as well.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, great. So it's kind of like your SLA as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, look, I really appreciate you stopping by. I have enjoyed this immensely.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, I'm a big Wirecast fan, so it's a pleasure to finally meet you. And
well, come by the booth.
Yes.
And we'll make sure to get you a copy of 15.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to poke around on it and see what I can do. I may not upgrade overnight because I like to don't want to poke the bear too much while I'm at NAB, but but I'll definitely play with it when I get back to the office if that's the case. So,
all right, John.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, John.
And we will see you around the booth. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Cheers.